And so let me see, first of all, okay, I see we're recording, so this will be available. Very good. Welcome, everyone, to this session of our summer series. This one, we're going to talk about a technology that has recently been emerging, and more importantly, how it impacts KM. And that technology is blockchain, the underlying technology. But as you will see during this session today, we will talk about how that underlying technology impacts a lot of other things organizationally, and then where KM fits in. We have a special treat because we have three global experts on, there we go, and this is a roundtable where we've assembled three of the top experts in the world on these technologies. And our topic is the impact. We call it our journey, the blockchain journey. And this will be a roundtable. Let me get my screen set up here correctly. This will be a roundtable discussion where we'll start off giving each of our speakers roughly 10 minutes to give an introduction to their particular aspect of these technologies from their point of view, and kind of to familiarize us with the basics of it. We'll even start with a short session on blockchain 101, blockchain for dummies, if you will. And then after each speaker has had a chance to give us that introduction, we'll open up. This is a participative session. So we hope that you will use the chat box, raise your hand. You know, there's a raise hand feature on Zoom. Use that. I'll be watching and see if if you have any thoughts, comments, insights, or questions during the course of our roundtable session. Please bring them up. We'd be happy to hear from you. All right, then. With that, and then after everybody has had their short period of introduction. After each speaker has their introduction, then we will open up for a roundtable discussion on various topics, not the least of which will be how all this impacts knowledge management. So with that, let's get started with our first speaker. And we've asked our first speaker to give us the basics of blockchain so that we at least have a basic understanding, because we know some of us are in various levels of that, and most of us are beginners in that area. So our first speaker is Dr. Millie Perry, and her nickname is Dr. Dow, and you'll find out what Dow means in more depth later. But she's an expert and consultant in blockchain in regards to innovation. She has 2 PhDs. Wow, count them. What do we call her? Dr. Squared, I guess. She has a PhD in information science, specializing in knowledge management and higher education and technology transfer and innovation, and another PhD in arts and culture sciences. So that's a very excellent blend, and we're looking forward to hearing from her. She is among the top 100 women of the future. She's in various blockchain projects throughout the world, including the World Economic Forum and the International Standards Organization, the Blockchain Alliance Group. Her list of activities in blockchain is very long, and she is the author of the book Blockchain: Turning Ecosystem into Ecosystem. And indeed, as she gets into DAOs, you will see how we'll be able to use this technology to form new types of business ecosystems. So I'm going to now turn the microphone over to Dr. Millie Perry for a brief introduction on blockchain. Millie, take it away, please.
Thank you very much, Art. I'm very happy to be here. All the resume is not important. The main issue is that my first step into the professional arena was as a KM officer at a university in Israel, and I'm very proud of my activity in this area. And this was the basis of my understanding of blockchain and the contribution of DAO to the organizational arena and KM. So I hope I can tie all those end looses strings in order to somehow clear the ideas of DAO and the connection to KM. I would like to use a clip in order to, just a moment. I'm trying to share my screen. I'm trying to use a clip in order to somehow demonstrate the main idea, the main principles of blockchain, to be very concise and very short. So I would like to, I hope it will help me to introduce the main principle of blockchain in, I don't know, 3 minutes. So I can say that we all have assets. It might be physical, like money or property, and it might be less visible, such as copyright or personal data. For example, it could be health records. We KM people know how to deal with invisible, less visible assets. We currently trust many third parties and institutions to store and transmit our assets. This includes banks, government agencies, and social media companies. For example, we deposit our money in banks and instruct them to make and receive payments. The financial system provides both the technical means to move the money around and makes it hard for people to cheat. But some people think this method is inefficient. Third parties charge for their services. Payment can take days to complete. And since our financial data is stored in one centralized place, like the bank computers, it becomes a magnet for hackers. Our data can secretly be used in ways that can harm us or abuse our privacy. In some countries, citizens are vulnerable to state surveillance, for instance. But is there an alternative? A digital system called blockchain, or DLT, decentralized ledger technology, promises to have an answer. It's designed to let people securely store their own data and send straight to the intended recipient, bypassing intermediaries. Blockchain is also designed to keep track of who owns what, even when assets are changing hands. So how does it work? Blockchain uses the principle of decentralization. Rather than concentrating data in a few centralized databases, it spreads copies to all the users within the system. This allows everyone to get a complete picture of what is going on, without having to rely on intermediaries. Users collectively agree upon the book balance before validating changes. Blockchain is designed to prevent data tampering. Blocks of validated data are attached together in a chronological order by encrypted chain. If anyone later tried to change the data, the block detaches from the chain and everyone can see this happening. This technology operates for a large number of transactions, and some issues can be raised. It requires intensive computer power to run blockchain, which raises environmental concerns, a lot of environmental concerns. But many companies and governments experiment with policy and application to cut the middlemen. Technology can save time and money for industries and create public blockchain available for all of us users without password or any centralized authority to give us permission to get in. The technology can bring about new way to store and transact data more effectively. For centuries, people have sought to safely exchange assets with a minimum fuss. Blockchain says it has the answer. I really hope some kind of clarity about the blockchain. We use the blockchain as the next internet. We called it the next internet or internet of assets. As we all know, as KMers, the current internet is transmitting only data, and upon the blockchain we can transmit assets and money. So the change would be a paradigm shift, not incremental change. I hope this very short 101 can somehow bring the idea of blockchain.
Yes, Millie, that the visualization especially was excellent. I've never seen such an elegant and concise explanation of blockchain before. Thank you. Let me quick ask our audience. We will get into the applications, but does anybody have any questions about the technology itself, about the basics? Please raise your hand or enter the chat. Okay, if not, then we'll go on to our next speaker, and feel free to enter any thoughts as we go along. Our next speaker then is Dr. Bruce Watson, and whereas Millie is Dr. Dow, I guess we can call Dr. Watson Dr. Algorithm. Would that be a fair description, Bruce? Because
that sounds good to me.
Oh, okay. Yes. Bruce Watson specializes, his specialty areas are cyber warfare, defense, intelligence, anything having to do with cybersecurity and algorithms, high performance software, networks. I think he covers a whole lot of areas, parallelism, strong algorithms. The list is long again, just like for each of our speakers. So by the way, each of our speakers, you can see their profiles on LinkedIn, so I shouldn't spend a lot of time going through bios. I think it's more important that we get to hear what they have to say. Now, what we've asked Bruce to come in and talk to us about is blockchain as an enabler of Web 3.0 and the metaverse, because that ties in as well. And that's probably another area that we're a little bit confused about, or we may hear some conflicting information. So we're turning to Bruce for some clarity on that. So if you can please give us an introduction from your end of how blockchain enables Web 3.0 and the metaverse, and of course with the emphasis on cybersecurity. So please take it away for your introduction. Please welcome Dr. Bruce Watson.
Hi everyone, thanks very much. I'm honored to actually be in a group like this, and of course it's exciting to follow up on Dr. Perry's introduction to blockchain, which is very nice. So in fact, it also subsumes a couple of the slides that I'll throw up there right now, so you don't have to be alarmed at the amount of text. And of course, these will be available to anyone afterwards also. So I'll cover very briefly a couple of things that Dr. Perry already covered. So there's a little bit of redundancy in there. A lot of blockchain was already put together a couple of years before the so-called blockchain by this guy, David Chaum. And some of you may have run into his name. He worked on digital cash and voting systems, but he didn't really get the kind of the traction that the rest of the world gets with blockchain. So there's a bit of prehistory to this as well, but nonetheless, exciting prehistory, because a lot of the foundational work was already done that allows for these technologies. So blockchain has already been introduced by Millie. I just want to re-emphasize the four things that are in boldface down there, because these are important things that play a role in how this fits together for Web 3.0, but for the interaction with metaverse and so on. And in particular, they're the ones that she already mentioned, this immutability thing. It should be the case that no one can go and fiddle and change things autonomously. In a blockchain, it's decentralized, so it shouldn't just live on one computer and be vulnerable in that sense. Strong security of various kinds. That doesn't have to be the case, but it's the smart thing to do, encrypting whatever happens to go onto the blockchain, and of course protecting the infrastructure surrounding that. And then this notion of a distributed ledger. So I'm very glad that Millie also used the acronyms like DLT, which are key factors there. So blockchain, we've already talked about enough to know that there are these notions of permissioned and permissionless, and there's, I think many of you know, there's a concept of mining in certain kinds of blockchains. I just mentioned this because it plays a role in how it fits together with the metaverse, which we come to in just a moment as well. A lot of blockchain, when it's not permissioned, so in other words, it's permissionless blockchain, involves these things known as consensus algorithms. Many people call them mining algorithms, but it's really a way for the community involved in that particular blockchain to agree on what's being added to the ledger or what's being added to the chain. And that's important because it prevents subversion by a small number of individuals. In other words, you have to have very large scale corruption or a tremendous amount of computing power to outmine everyone else and basically take things over. So that turns out to be relatively unlikely. And there are a couple of specific styles of coming up with consensus algorithms. The ones that use up immense amounts of computing power, as Dr. Milley mentioned, tend to be these proof of work algorithms that incentivize people to set up entire farms of servers to do that kind of thing. So that's environmentally a terrible idea. But nonetheless, those things exist. And this interacts, of course, also with the metaverse and Web 3.0 end of things. Now we get to something that isn't strictly related just to the blockchain, but it's a general concept, and this is the notion of smart contracts that many of you will also know. This is one of the enablers, of course, of the various financial transaction infrastructure things that Dr. Milley talked about, but also are enablers in Web 3.0. And it doesn't have to just be about the exchange of money. This can also be about the exchange of copyright, the exchange of other rights, transfer of ownership, and so on. And that then becomes interesting, and I hope to stimulate a little bit of discussion with that, because once we talk about ownership or creation of copyrightable material or intellectual property within the metaverse, we'd like that to be transferable back to the, let's say, the real universe, or stuff to be transferred in the other direction or between different metaverses. So we have to remember there isn't just one metaverse, and we'll come back to that in just a moment. Smart contracts are a brilliant idea. It allows for the setting up of simple contracts with a set of rules which allow them to be triggered. And we see things in real life like this, so making an offer to buy a
Bruce,
house.
I'm sorry, I'm interrupting you for a minute.
Sorry, Maya.
Your presentation, hi Bruce, your presentation, the right hand is hidden. So we are guessing and listening very carefully. We have a black square there.
Okay, is that any better?
Sure.
Yes, it's reduced.
Yeah,
now the black square is shrunk now. Yeah.
Okay. Ironically, the black square was actually all of your pictures, so I apologize for minimizing you. It's but please do interrupt as any other glitches crop up. I'll gladly work on correcting them. So smart contracts are, these notions of things that we experience in real life, contingent offers to buy a house, excuse me, things along those lines. And these are then encoded algorithmically in these things called smart contracts. So that's a brilliant idea. The bad news is they tend to be encoded in normal programming languages. And anyone who's worked on software knows that that's probably a terrible idea. So programmers tend to have a tremendous amount of enthusiasm for what they're doing, but the reality of getting it right and debugging it is a bit painful. And of course, when it revolves around large amounts of money, we wouldn't like to have to be stuck debugging or reverse engineering or having crashed smart contracts and so on. So there's a very important factor there as well, which also relates to cybersecurity. So smart contracts, I'll just throw this up there because I think it's important just to realize that these can be pervasive, or permeate our infrastructure. Now, how do we get software correct? I think also most people mistakenly have the impression that it's impossible to make software correct. It turns out not to be true. I mean, I'm doing a shameless plug for a book that I was a co-author of, but it's by far not the only book, and you can find this book for free online. So I'm not about to get rich pitching the book, but nonetheless, already for the last 70 years, it's been known how to build correct software. So I'm also advocating for plugging a lot of the cybersecurity holes, especially in smart contracts, by using methodologies like this, which are actually reasonably easy to do and actually get us to the finish line of having correct software. So now onwards to the metaverse, which I think should have been the meat of this, but I just want to introduce this briefly in the coming minutes before I hand it back to our moderators, and hopefully this also stimulates some of the questions for later on. So this is Neil Stephenson, nominally the inventor of the metaverse, but of course the metaverse has actually been something that's been floating around in people's minds for decades, if not for centuries. The notion that we can virtualize all of these things and actually have a complete ecosystem and economy within the metaverse. So the company Meta, of course, the parent company of Facebook, is now the driver, and of course they've had their own hiccups in the last little while, but nonetheless, I think it's a very promising direction to go, regardless of the short-term issues. And the reason that this has been enabled is there have been some key changes in our digital infrastructure. This has also helped along blockchain, and I think Millie has also mentioned how some of these things fit together. But the growth of extreme computing, so access to very, very high-powered computers, typically living in the cloud, lots and lots of bandwidth. So most countries are very, very well connected. We have augmented reality, virtual reality, so the ability to actually really get into the complete system. And then that starts to trigger all kinds of other things that are possible pros or cons. And these tend to be jurisdictional issues. So once people are generating intellectual property or making money inside the metaverse, how do we transfer that outwards? What is the jurisdiction of these kinds of things? Does copyright exist? What if someone just duplicates the entire metaverse and runs it elsewhere according to their own rules? So there's no shortage of interesting problems there as well. But blockchain is one of the key factors that comes to the rescue in this. And as Millie already mentioned, this is one of the ideal vehicles. In fact, I would even argue it's actually the only ideal vehicle for managing assets in a very digital way right now. And of course, the metaverse needs something like that. So onwards to a very, very short taxonomy of these things. You'll find that I've spoken about this a bit before in some more detail. So I just want to very quickly flip the slides through and show you what's going on, what the choices are. I'm not going to talk right now about what the best choices are. We can leave that for the discussion. But what it comes down to is we, of course, have our real world, and that's what you see on the right panel here of this slide. We have the metaverse, and we have this barrier between us and the metaverse. And we can place the miners or the consensus algorithm people in the physical universe, and we can place the blockchain in the physical universe, and we can allow the metaverse to simply operate as a kind of game. And we do all of the management of assets and transfers of assets out here in the real world. So that would be one way of doing things, relatively unexciting. But we could, of course, move these things into the metaverse, and we could do all of the mining inside this virtual community where there are virtual computers. And all of the blockchain is, of course, being managed in there as well. Then we can start doing crazy things like having the mining on the outside and the blockchain living on the inside. I'll just briefly mention it without giving you a hint as to whether this is a good or a bad solution. We can flip those around where all of the mining can only happen inside the virtual world and the blockchain exists on the outside. We can then have the blockchain sit on both. So parts of the blockchain, various blocks on the blockchain, if you will, are then in the physical world and some are in the meta universe, but all of the mining happens on the inside. We can have the same thing with the mining on the outside. We can move the miners to both inside and outside, so that's their choice. This turns out to be a terrible idea. I'll give you a hint already. And we can, of course, do combinations where the block lives on the outside and the miners can be hybridized, and then hybridizing of both of these. And then we, of course, get back to smart contracts where we need to tie these things together. And I'm convinced that smart contracts are also one of the key factors in securing systems. So we know how to build them correctly if we actually would just move to a more, let's say, provable infrastructure for doing that kind of thing. This would be relatively painful to do right now because there's already a lot of existing infrastructure, but better now than much later on where it's incredibly difficult. And we can then provide for smart contracts which go either in the outbound direction or the inbound direction. And then the very last slide that I want to mention here is we need to be cognizant of the fact that, as I said earlier, Meta won't be the only player. There will be other metaverses, and we're faced with the notion that we will have to have contracts between them, transfer of intellectual property, buying something in one metaverse and being able to transfer it somewhere else or make the payment somewhere else will, of course, be one of these key factors. So Art, I'm going to hand it back to you, and thank you very much. I've hit or even gone over my time, so thanks.
No, you've certainly gotten us, gotten our interest, gotten us very excited, and very much opened our awareness to even more than I think we were even aware of before we started this session. Yeah, and as KMers, Mariah was talking before we started, that she's planning on including in next year's session that we're putting together, a session on XR. And I said, what's XR? I said, well, we have virtual reality, we have physical reality, we have augmented reality, now we have extended reality. So we have all of these realities. But again, how do we tie them together in a secure manner where we can maintain consistency and trust and surety and assurance? And so it's clear that blockchain is going to play a major role in that as we begin to expand out to these different metaverses. So, wow. Okay, that's you're whetting our appetite. We're definitely going to come back and explore this more deeply. Hopefully, you can see, our audience can see how there are many facets to what's a very basic technology, and many facets and extensions. So the one part yet that still remains is intellectual property, because both of our previous speakers sort of touched on that, and about blockchain being a more secure way to ensure intellectual property protection. But and another thing I think you might be catching on to is that we're becoming more and more multidisciplinary. Each of our speakers are experts, not just in one field. And our final speaker, our third speaker, before we open up our roundtable, is Dr. Owais Sheikh. And he exists in two worlds. He spends a lot of time in Pakistan, where he's living now, in Islamabad, and also in Munich, Germany, where he got his doctorate at the Max Planck Institute. And his doctorate was in pharmaceutical approval data access and intellectual property rights in medicine. And he backs that up with his master's degree in law. And so that's his specialty, intellectual property. He sits on various intellectual property boards. And so with that, I'd like to introduce Dr. Owais Sheikh to talk about how blockchain relates to intellectual property protection. So please take it away, Owais.
Thank you, Mr. Murray. Thank you very much for the invitation, and also to the Knowledge Management Global Network for the invitation. I'm really honored to be here, and I'm really grateful to Dr. Perry and Mr. Watson for giving that great introduction about blockchain and the various facets, which I also still struggle to understand because I'm not a technologist. So it becomes difficult for me to understand each and every part of that. But my task is now a bit easier because of your explanation. So I'm going to focus on IP. And then in the second part, I'll try and talk about the relationship between IP and blockchain. So a brief introduction to IP and where IP and knowledge management actually cross paths. And in some cases, some would say they're both the same thing. So in terms of IP law, when we start thinking about IP law, we normally talk about the categories of IP law. So we talk about trademarks, we talk about patents, copyrights, designs. These are usually registrable IP. And then we have data, we have algorithms, we have formulas. Some of them are expressly excluded from the ambit of IP law. But where, if we move from the IP law discipline, IP as a legal discipline, to IP as a management discipline, we'll see a lot of similarities, rather almost identity between knowledge management and IP management, because on the core of these two, let's say, disciplines, if they are intangibles. So when you're talking about knowledge, we're talking about managing intangibles. We're talking about IP, the subject matter is always intangibles. So that's the one point I wanted to highlight before going to blockchain. That IP, when seen from a management perspective, is almost equal to knowledge management. And from a legal perspective, I would say that knowledge management subsumes intellectual property when it comes to legal definition. I think I am having the sharing right, so I will just go directly to the one small slide that I've
Yes, we can
prepared.
see. Yes.
Yeah. So I just wanted to talk about now blockchain and intellectual property. I'm a founder of a startup which actually works on NFTs. It's called Quick Trust, and it's based in out of London. And we are working on NFTs and how we can create the next, let's say, edition of NFTs where discovery is possible. So users are not discovered as such all the time, but in cases of frauds and misuse of your or let's say misappropriation of your digital assets, it becomes easier to actually track someone who actually did it. And there too, we started off with intellectual property. So from the perspective of blockchain as a technology, IP is a use case in that sense, that we can use intellectual property in several different ways. We can use blockchain technology in several different ways to manage intellectual property. So, for example, I've given some examples here, and these are not exhaustive. So what we can use blockchain technology is to record, and I'm not going to go back to what Dr. Perry and Mr. Watson have talked about. They've extensively discussed how the blockchain technology works. So we can immutably and with provenance store and reflect data in a trust environment on various aspects of intellectual property. So, for example, in many cases, I've also mentioned, for example, the unregisterable intangibles. In IP, we call them registerable and unregisterable. And usually the problem comes, let's say it's a little more difficult to determine the ownership, the origin, the subject matter. Maybe usage is not that difficult, but the origin, the subject matter, and the date of creation, for example, is highly, let's say, contentious between an original creator and a user, or let's say an unauthorized user. And in cases of unregisterable IP, like pieces of data, algorithms, formulas, it's very important in many cases to actually determine who is the owner and what is the subject matter. You will also appreciate that the current IP system, or the IP legal system, is not a production of the 21st century or the 21st century, actually. So it was created back in, I would say, originated 500 years ago, but in some way became modernized in the 19th century. There have been piecemeal changes in development in IP law and incorporation of, let's say, legal concepts and legal protections as we got technologically advanced, but the basis is pretty much the same. We are kind of working up on that foundation, on that basis, which actually comes from the 19th century. So in many cases, we are still struggling and debating and discussing on international level, national level, on academic level, whether something should be protected in IP law or not. So simplifying it, there are a lot of intangibles which cannot be legally protected under IP law as a registrable asset. In such cases, all these especially origin, subject matter, and the date of creation, is something that can be recorded on the blockchain. And as Dr. Perry and Mr. Watson talked, you can record immutably without change all the information that is there, and which is for everyone to see in many cases. But there's also an interesting thought. What about the replacement of IP registry, the state IP registries, which actually today register intellectual property? So if blockchain is such a technology which is far superior to the technology or the databases that are being used by IP registries all across the world, and if they move to blockchain, much of the, let's say, routine tasks in terms of recording of intangible assets and their details will not be needed. We will have that through blockchain. The only part that will still remain would be some application of human intelligence. And I'm specifically using the word human because I still feel, and after using ChatGPT for such a long time, I still feel that it has a long way to go to come close to how we actually perceive things. So there will still be some kind of need, especially when it comes to comparison of different assets, especially or copyright assets, or 2 songs, or 2 write-ups, or 2 pictures. There will still be some kind of human intervention. Putting that aside, I do foresee that blockchain as a technology will also make things a lot easier for the IP administration systems, IP administration within companies, which also you can talk about under knowledge organization, and even for the legal system, for the judiciary, for the adjudication system. So this blockchain technology, in terms of recording intellectual property information, is something that is, I think, in the coming years, more and more IP registries and IP and knowledge organizations will be including, especially with regard to unregisterable IP. So I think I've taken my time.
Yes, that's an excellent overview, Owais. And you again bring in another aspect of blockchain's applications, that is in intellectual property, and that in itself is a whole world unto itself. We've heard the basic underlying fundamental technology of blockchain from Millie. Then we've heard how it applies to Web 3.0 and the metaverse from Bruce. And then Owais just gave us the intellectual property side. And I forgot to mention how Owais and I were connected. We were connected through a community called IdeaGist, which has now is the largest virtual business incubator in the world, with over 300,000 incubating businesses on it, and of which a large number of those are in Pakistan. Pakistan has a growing business incubation ecosystem. And the interesting thing about that is this platform, and I'll type in the URL in the chat box when I get a chance. That platform uses NFTs, right, non-fungible tokens, because IdeaGist, by its name, people have an idea. And so, but they need help in developing that idea, formulating it, testing it out. But then again, as we see very often happens, some people are very anxious to steal that idea and run away with it. And it's very frustrating for people who are trying to break into, who are entrepreneurs, budding entrepreneurs, trying to break into a business. And so IdeaGist is setting up a platform, an ecosystem platform that protects that. You can build up a certain sub-community of trusted individuals who then share tokens. If I, for instance, provide advice, I get some tokens in exchange from that entrepreneur in sharing their information, and other people will share and develop intellectual property within a small ecosystem that can then be expanded out and have that IP protected. So I wanted to bring that up. So there's one more aspect we haven't talked about then. That leads us into the probably the final element, in our overview, and for that we're going to return back to Millie Perry, and that is DAO, as we mentioned that briefly at the beginning. DAO, Distributed Autonomous Organization, kind of what an idea just is forming. And so bringing all of this together in the form of DAO, who else but Dr. DAO to tell us about that. So Millie, back over to you to tie it all together into how we can pull this into this new kind of organization called DAO. Go ahead, Millie.
Thank you, Art. Thank you very much. I hope you see my screen.
Yes.
Great. So DAO, it stands for Decentralized Autonomous Organization. I think we focused on decentralization with the previous speakers, and organization. We all know what does it mean. But the autonomous usually is very striking, and people are a little bit afraid of this idea. But I would like to shine some light on the idea of DAO. While the term is most associated with cryptocurrencies, it actually describes a method of digital coordination and collaboration. That is a way of organizing online around a cause without centralized authority or intermediary in between. We know the current format or structure of organization are hierarchical, pyramid shape. And the DAO idea comes to eliminate this structure and flatten the organization as much as we can. And one of the core tenets of blockchain is decentralization, as we mentioned. But the idea that is that no centralized authority like boards or C-level managers would need in order to facilitate the organizational activity. Instead, the blockchain community govern itself using blockchain technology, and as we all know, KM is structured around communities, and the DAO is a group of people working together on project with the shared goal and maybe vision, but without a central authority that will decide for the community what are the aim or what are the vision of the organization. Members of the DAO make decisions, and the blockchain technology execute them, those decisions automatically according to set of preordinated rules. There are, we heard about the smart contract. In a minute, I will say another issue about that. There are today currently about 5,000 DAOs operating as of today with focus on media, finance, software developing, gaming, art. But the principle of DAO means that the use cases are effectively limitless, because we're changing the format and the activity or the mechanism of the organization. And as we know today, the corporate can use a lot of aims or a lot of visions. And it could be non-profit organization, and it could be business organization, it could be investment company or fund, and a lot of other purposes that any organization can aim at. For example, I can highlight the Ukraine DAO. It was a DAO established to raise money for and distributed money to victims of the war of Ukraine. And if we look even for the issue of philanthropy, we know that today philanthropy or crowdfunding mechanism in the internet do not allow sending money to a war zone. And for this good cause, none of us could contribute money. And the only way was to contribute money through this Ukraine DAO and the blockchain. This Ukraine DAO minted, auctioned, and sold Ukraine flag NFTs for more than £3 million. Within a DAO, members get make votes and proposal for the community. Each of the members can vote, and each of the members can propose proposals for the future direction of the organization, including where the allocation of resources and how it operates on the technical level. For example, a metaverse platform called Decentralized has a DAO which the member can vote on how content moderator works within the virtual world, or on what item of clothing users can dress their avatar in. So any issue could be a proposal and an issue for voting. In many DAOs, community members buy the organizational native token. We called it governance token. It is the voting right, okay? And they using fiat currencies or cryptocurrencies in order to purchase it. Those tokens are then used to cast voting on proposals, and the money raised from the token sales fund the DAO. This is the treasury of the DAO. Automation comes in a form of smart contract, as we heard before. Those smart contracts, we call it ITTT. If this, then that, is a series of conditions that we set previously to the smart contract launching to the blockchain. It is a self-executing program on a blockchain set to automatically trigger once certain conditions are met. For example, when a proposal gets a majority of vote, all the proposal is executed. All data is transparent. This is very important if we're talking about KM, for instance. I think most of our effort in KM processes are for transparenting, to make the processes more transparent, and to use the technology for sharing the data. So on the blockchain, everything is transparent. You don't need to actively look for the information. It's there. You know, it's not after closed doors. Not only the manager are voting, and all of us, members of the community. The automated execution of DAO rules means no one can, or a group of people, can be responsible for a certain task or cannot be influenced or otherwise interfere with the process. So no one can hijack the organization. And if we're looking for the DAO and the future of DAOs, there's a lot of evangelism. I'm one of them, have to confess, about how this relatively new technology could change the world or the global economy or the format and mechanism of corporates. However, DAO could be poised to play a key role in the next generation of internet, where we call it Web3, which is the term used to describe the next wave of internet promises for focus on decentralization and ownership of the users. While today Web2 is monopolized by a tech giant, with all of its implication for data privacy, advertising, content moderation, and trust, which is another issue in knowledge management, Web3 will seek to change the paradigm by giving user more control. We call the blockchain or the DAO users own users, its owner and user together in one world, in order to stress the idea of ownership of our data, our decision, our information. Those components of digital dust are not in the future, won't be in one centralized computers of Facebook or Amazon or Google. DAO could provide the structure necessary to give users more say in the future of the internet. And you can see in this slide the prediction for the 2022 and 2023 that we are talking about the future of the global economy.
Excellent. I can see, Millie, as a business person myself, when we see a business opportunity and we try and assemble partners, every time we do that, we exchange a series of documents, right? Non-disclosure agreement, teaming agreement, partnership agreement, all of these things. That takes a lot of time, and everyone seems to be different. Is it fair to say that DAOs give us, first of all, a chain of custody, a protected, a secure and assured, trusted way of doing those sorts of transactions, that once they're accepted, it can be practically automated? And it sounds like you were also saying, if you select this particular DAO, that it can actually trigger automated processes within your organization. Is that correct? Are we really talking a major leap in streamlining a lot of business transactions that typically take place? Is that sound about right?
Well, I really would like to confirm that this is the way the future will go, but I think the transition or the change between the format of the current corporate, the structure, is still very hierarchical, and it won't be able to, it can use some smart contract, but in order to shift into a mechanism of DAO, it will require very basic understanding and shift of a control. The main issue is control, because on the DAO or in the DAO, the control is in the user's hand. And in the corporate, the control, we all know, are in the board hands and the C-levels and the founding members. Not the users, not the members, not the employees. So I think the mental problem is the main one.
Right. And any thoughts on how to overcome that? Because, you know, like many things, we know we need to always become more competitive, more efficient, more effective, and this is certainly one way to do that. Maybe you know, either Owais or Bruce, do you have any thoughts as to what Millie's talking about, how we might be able to overcome that resistance to change that organizations, the traditional organizations, have? Any thoughts from our other panelists?
I'll just jump in with a short comment on that, actually, and that is something that works in much of the high-tech industry, which is not an organizational thing, but is a technical solution, is what's known as design patterns or architectural patterns. And you know, these things, you know, there are technical advantages to doing that kind of thing. But the other really important thing to realize is people like pre-thought through structures that create really a low barrier to entry and make it painless to go along with these things. This is, you know, on the stuff that I talked about, there's a certain maturity level that isn't quite there yet. So it's a relief to hear from Dr. Perry about, you know, where things are going and the relative maturity of things on that side, which is very promising. So I think, you know, if we look at some of the metaverse structures, there's still a bit of work to do, but the things are falling into place with having, you know, almost canned solutions that satisfy business best practice. Anyway, over to you.
Oh, very good. Any other thoughts? And don't forget our audience members, please chime in with either your comments, your insights, or your questions. So let's continue that discussion. And our audience, of course, are knowledge management leaders, practitioners of all stripes in the field of knowledge management. So let me just throw an open question to our panelists, and please just chime in as you like, as you think of something. Knowledge management goes in two directions for us, so we would be curious now, giving us an introduction and a flavor to these technologies. We would probably have two questions in general. Number one is, how can these technologies help us in our profession of knowledge management? How can they make us do our jobs better as knowledge management leaders and practitioners? And the flip side, maybe think about, if you can, how can knowledge management help overcome some of these obstacles and challenges that you mentioned? So let me just throw that out as a broad topic and ask our three panelists to just chime in with your thoughts on that. The intersection, if you will, between knowledge management and these blockchain technologies. What are your thoughts?
So if I may go first, if it's okay.
Yes, please. Yes.
Again, looking at it from the IP perspective, so usually we do not, even when the IP practitioners are talking about this, we do not differentiate between registrable IP, and I'm using it again and again, which you can also call hard IP, and then the other one is unregistrable IP, which sometimes people call soft IP. And we can understand from the perspective of, and it's totally on the other side of decentralization, there's a centralized registry which actually issues those certifications, let's say, which are nothing but proof of ownership. And second, and a determination of the kind of contours, as I say it, contours of an intangible. So that document, what it does, it actually in reality tries to convert an intangible into something tangible. That's what it tries to do. It actually helps us, all of us, to actually know who the owner is and from where to where is this intangible asset is. In contrast to, if we look at a tangible asset or anything tangible, we can determine ownership either by obviously somebody who has a receipt of purchase or ownership, or somebody who actually possesses it. So law in certain cases also recognizes possession in certain cases as ownership. And secondly, obviously we know the contours of a tangible asset. So what this document does is actually provides these two, let's say, the confidence or the trust from that centralized agency, which is the state at this point in the time that we live in. So it's usually the state which actually provides this. In terms of knowledge management, I think, and I think this is not new for especially the knowledge managers here. The more important usage of blockchain technology, again, is from the perspective of those pieces of knowledge which cannot be subject to a registration regime in IP. So IP is the law of knowledge assets, law of knowledge assets, and those assets which are useful, which do have a future benefit for the business, and today has actually or do have today a certain monetary value which is spent in creating them, in acquiring them, and even the risk of using them without permission. So that's where IP law actually comes in and just kind of mediates. In cases where we have, and every business has a lot of intangible, which is still not within the ambit of IP law proper, especially registrable IP. And that goes back to my point of the IP system originating or being codified internationally back in 19th century, 1883 and 1886. So today our businesses have 90% market value coming from intangibles. And if you look at those, you will realize that a good part is IP based, but a huge chunk is not protectable by IP. So technologies like blockchain are, in my opinion, kind of fill this gap, which IP has been, or IP law as a discipline has been struggling with, especially with regard to non-registrable IP or soft IP. So that's my 2 cents.
Okay, excellent. Thank you. So let me throw a zinger in here. Now you mentioned, I think you were the one who mentioned, and I think quite accurately, that ChatGPT still has a long way to go. So we know all of these technologies are evolving. The three of you have pointed out pluses and minuses and areas that still need to be improved. And of course, AI is the same way. What are your thoughts? And we could start with you since you're still on the screen, Owais, and then I would like to hear also from Bruce and Millie on this. What are your thoughts on what is AI going to do? How is AI going to impact all of this? I mean, can you see AI starting to form its own DAOs and doing things like this? So just a little bit of a peek in the future with your thoughts on the impact of AI on everything we've talked about so far. We'll start with you, Owais, and then maybe to Bruce and Millie.
So I'll be scared if AI can do its own DAOs. Honestly, I will be. With all the Sophias and of the world, I don't know where things will go. But again, coming back to so now let me make that distinction between knowledge management and IP, and use that. So in IP, two core questions right now everyone is struggling with. Ownership when it comes to creations by the AI, AI systems. And so right now, the jury is still out, and we are thinking that the jury is still out, and there's no final conclusive, let's say, judicial determination, or let's say there's no consensus right now. Let's put it like this: that AI can be the owner of an intangible creation, especially from an IP perspective. I'll leave the second part with regard to the knowledge management part, and then the more I'm thinking about this, I'm thinking that knowledge management specifically is useful for those types of intangibles where IP leaves a gap. So you manage, you organize, and there's tacit knowledge, there is uncoded informal knowledge, which may not be the subject matter of what happens when AI systems actually create that knowledge. Is it as difficult or as problematic within when we debate about IP issues or not? So maybe I'm a bit naive in saying that not really. It may be more helpful for organizations to deploy AI systems to create internal knowledge, or let's say collate internal knowledge, create products from that knowledge. We will come after that and we'll say, okay, hey, if you have to give us a natural person, because in 1883, that's what those people decided, that a natural person has to own it. I'm not saying that I don't like the natural person requirement. It really makes things still human, but right now my mind is still has not come to a conclusion with regard to this, especially ownership question.
No, it's something we all definitely need to be thinking about. So, Bruce, how about you? What are your thoughts on this, both with regard to AI and KM?
Yeah, I should mention right away that I'm an AI optimist. I mean, I see a lot of positive developments, and obviously there are a few things to look out for. So the developments right now, I mean, some of the things that we're working on, for example, are ChatGPT-like things. So these are called large language models, but we're developing them, for example, to write up smart contracts. So in a conversational way, to be able to ask it to come up with a single smart contract or a network of smart contracts that satisfy a certain business need. So I think there are a couple of things like that that you could call low-hanging fruit. The other exciting things, to be very honest, will actually depend on, let's say, old AI. So everyone's now captivated with ChatGPT type things because they look cool and they're conversational and so on. But we have to remember that artificial intelligence research has, you know, a history of probably 75 years or so. And a lot of that symbolic AI is very, very powerful. It doesn't look as cool, but it can do really interesting things. And among the things that it can do are automated reasoning about the correctness of smart contracts, finding whether there are flaws and gaps in them, but also optimizing things. So these are things that are not native to ChatGPT, but to, let's say, old artificial intelligence. So there's a tremendous gap and opportunity there for someone to start applying all of those techniques to this. And then the last thing I briefly want to mention before we go to Dr. Perry is if I turn it around and think about the fact that everyone now wants their own ChatGPT, either within their organization or you know, across a couple of related organizations, potentially for KM purposes, you have to start out also asking yourself about information leakage. You know, so this is in a sense the opposite of knowledge sharing, but potential siloization, or at least management of how knowledge propagates. And, you know, there's another opportunity to be able to layer language models and knowledge representation and ontologies on top of things like blockchain, where, you know, there's a clear provenance and ownership to certain subcomponents of the ontology, and, you know, some things may be hidden and some things may be not hidden. So you could view that as a kind of co-development of knowledge bases. So thanks. I'll hand it off back to
you bring
Art,
you
Dr.
bring up
Perry.
before just one thought. You bring up a very good point, Bruce. Something for all of us to keep reminding ourselves of. AI is a very broad discipline. It has a lot, just like we're finding out here, blockchain has a lot of different facets to it. So too AI, and you mentioned ontology there. So, you know, the ChatGPT is a large language model. It has pluses and minuses. All right, so it can produce very natural language sounding things, but it can also be very dumb. And that's where maybe things, putting a layer of ontology on top that you mentioned, actually adds some more structure to that knowledge, rather than just going out to billions of documents and assembling something and saying, hey, this is what I think the answer is. Ontology gives us more proof of and established, you know, what is established truth and definition and things, semantic definitions, especially things like that. So again, there's an opportunity right there for KM and AI to come together and to help enhance this new world of metaverses and DAOs. So, okay, over to you, Millie. It's a lot. We're building on a lot here. So, what are your thoughts
on today? I'm joining Bruce with the optimism. I think AI will increase and jumpstart the human capability of learning. And I think this would be very positive issue. And we could look on blockchain and think if this would be the memory, not the learning parts, learning process, but memory or the registry. And it would be open, transparent, good for everyone. We wouldn't need very efficient. We wouldn't need all those intermediaries. And if we'll go to the other question about KM and DAO, I think the DAO will solve most of the KMer problems, like transparency and like sharing and like operating as an open community. And I think the strength of KMers in managing community will be very much required in DAOs, because DAO do not have any central authority, no manager, no one in charge in order to set the way or lead the way. So the community and sub-communities and the ability of organizing community and facilitate community will be required. And the KMers have a lot of experience, though into in a chronological or not hierarchical organization, but they can use and implement these this experience, important experience, in DAOs as well. Because in the end of the day, it is an organization, and there are a lot of groups there, a lot of interests, a lot of issues to coordinate. And I'm sure the knowledge, the idea of knowledge management, that this is the main basis of DAO, the capabilities and the knowledge of people could be very useful.
Very good. So good. Wonderful. Thank you. Thanks all of you. So let's hear from our, we have a KM global community here of KMers. So let's hear what you have to say. And I see Sabine, you have raised your hand. So please come off mute. And what are your thoughts on this? And if you have a question, please ask.
First of all, thank you for bringing blockchain again to my attention, because I'm coming from the digital cinema side. So asset management and securing assets is the point that I think is not only a one-to-one business case, but it's a one-to-many. If it comes to AI, then content is a real value. And as a content owner, I might think about sharing a whole knowledge graph with others, or providing them content for their training, because, well, it's risky to set up an whatsoever ChatGPT system regarding IT security. And the only thing is, if you have a problem, start again from scratch. Therefore, you really need content, where it comes from and which is trustful. So this is why I think about my experiences with digital cinema content, where I come from. So I was with SEMTI, the Society of Motion Picture Engineers, in the standardization process for how to secure content and how with simple public-private key mechanisms. Can you build up a system or hook up a system where you have a symmetric key for encrypting your content and easy transportation mechanisms? Maybe not just blockchains, because it's not the history is not the main thing. In blockchain, from the very beginning what happens with rights. It's more the one-to-many issue that you'd have to manage. So just to bring in another perspective of what's in this field important. Thanks for reminding me in this encryption thing. It was just really one-to-one, but still I think from an KMer perspective, for me it's more interesting to run with NFTs, where I have the signature, and then the next thing is public-private key infrastructure, where I just sign encrypted or unencrypted content.
Oh, very good. Thank you. Any thoughts from our panelists? Any response?
So I wonder if I could just add something briefly in there, and I don't want to, make it unnecessarily technical, but I really like, some of the key things that Sabine mentioned, and there's this tremendous body of old knowledge. It used to be called steganography and watermarking and so on. So it's fantastic that we've been able to move on from that and now have more reasonable ways of doing that. At the very tail end, Sabine, one of the things that you said also piqued my interest, because one of the other areas that I happen to work in is cryptography and cryptographic primitives. And the interesting upcoming development is, of course, quantum computing and post-quantum cryptography. And these things have only recently been standardized, in fact, are still being standardized. But the vast majority of blockchain efforts are not yet moving along with these new cryptographic standards. So it gives on the one side an interesting opportunity, but on the other side also a potential long-term vulnerability for very, very large blockchains that may need to be re-encrypted in the future as these things become vulnerable. So I've no real answer for how that will play out, except for it will eventually happen, and we can either tackle it or kick the tin down the road a bit.
That's good. Thank you. Any other thoughts?
Well, I hate to be the I don't know, to bring bad news, but I think the content industry or the content world will be utterly changed in the 5 years to come. And I think the boundaries will be blurred between human and AI creation. And even the IP, I think the IP law ought to change. As we heard here, it is from the systems from the 19th century, and we ought to get to enter the next century. And I'm sure that the regulators should have to adopt as well for a lot of regulation, finance, and others. But the IP would be one of them, and the content creation. We call it the creator economy. It will change. I think the way of protecting content will change, and I predict a lot of disruptive technologies and processes in the next 5 years.
True enough, and I think Owais was giving us the same ideas to think about. And you're right. And not only we need to go 2 centuries, we're almost 2 centuries behind, and that just applies to accounting too as well. So yeah, there's a lot of things we're going to have to do, and communities like this, I think, and forums like this are a great way. Yes, go ahead.
So and thank you, Sabine, for this great point, and cinema industry, music industry, and all the creatives. And I like maybe 2 years back or one and a half years back, I started thinking that maybe blockchain and AI together will kill the need for any IP law, to be very honest. And then so I still believe that a lot of the tasks, a lot of the things that we do, especially with regard to IP administration, will become redundant by the intersection of AI, especially the large language models, and blockchain. The more we'll have capabilities in, let's say, coming up with not only music, not only creative pieces, but also think of trademarks, of brand names. If I can give the prompt, and I think right now I can do that. I can give the prompt and I can have a trademark which is very similar to my competitors, but different enough, both from a branding perspective and from the legal perspective. So these kind of possibilities are very exciting for me, at least. I feel that AI, blockchain together can actually make routine functions in the IP system redundant. What still will be left is some kind of, let's say, understanding or the nuances in more contentious cases in IP from a legal perspective. And I'm so I'm pretty sure that from a management perspective, and again this ties back to knowledge management, blockchain AI together can actually help in many aspects within IP and within knowledge management as well.
No, I agree. All right. I wish we could continue this, but we're getting
We need
close
to
the end now,
let
so it's time.
Annie speak. We need to. Annie's waiting so long. Let her please.
Oh,
speak.
I didn't see
Yes,
her,
I know, your best
her
friend.
hand raised. Okay, Annie, yes, go ahead.
I just wanted to kind of jump in here a little bit, and I do agree with Dr. Perry that there's going to be a lot of disruption here. When I look at blockchain, I think back to, like I said, the history of AI when you had linked lists and also the list language, and the reason that failed was because of the capacity of the computers, not because of the intelligence of the people who were doing them. And it was a good approach. And then I look back at intangible assets or intangibles, which we're talking about. And I know that they actually had categories, and no one has actually named their intangibles, nor have they looked at how to name them. So therefore, we have a problem there. And that's part of knowledge management because of the linguistics and the taxonomies that we're supposed to have. So what I think, unfortunately, I'm optimistic, but I also think that we're going to see some major upheavals because in not a lot of spots coming from even the history of it, we've peaked and valleyed with knowledge management, artificial intelligence, and digitization quite a bit. And we even went through an era where we were supposed to digitize things so that we could represent them within our computer systems. And then we were supposed to have this digital world that we could pull these objects and create them and then move forward. But I think in a lot of cases, we leave the people out of this. And people are very important because we do have tacit knowledge and we do have explicit knowledge, which we've captured within. So a lot of times with the previous studies, you see that people tend to forget that what's in their heads, you cannot take out of it. And that's a very important part in some of our processes. So that's capital, which kind of relates back to like our financial systems. And then you got capital, you have assets, which is the person who's present within your organization. Remember with knowledge management, we're losing hard gained knowledge by people walking out the door. And therefore, we have to start over again. And I think those and bring them all together, I think that the disruption is going to happen again, and we may wind up once again stovepipe and peaking a predecessor to knowledge. And I think that it's critically important that we begin to understand how we insert it into the way we are working and doing business or living currently. Okay. So that's just my kind of.
Great thought, Annie. You're breaking up. We can see you're talking, but we can't hear you. Yeah, can't hear you, Annie. Sorry. We got the gist of your thing. You just for the last 30 seconds we missed you. Yeah, it looks like you're frozen. Sorry, no audio. Okay, anyway, it is time to wrap up. Annie, by the way, is our director for IIKI, the USA arm of this fantastic global network, and she is leading our own series, which meets every Wednesday. And I'm going to put let's see here. I'm going to put the link into the chat, and we encourage you. It's also a complimentary registration. Every Wednesday for at least the next 6 weeks, we're talking different topics on leading in extraordinary times, and we'll be touching upon a lot of these subjects here that we talked about today. So with that, tell you what, everybody, please unmute yourself. Everyone, okay? Everybody that's online, please unmute, okay? And let's have a rousing round of applause for our 3 panelists. Let's hear everybody. Coming off mute.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, now, Mariah, you better put everybody back on mute again so we don't hear all the background.
No, we don't need to put people on mute. It's okay.
Okay, all right. All right, so thank you to our three panelists, fantastic. And Mariah, I'll turn it over to you to close out. And I know you've got some announcements also of some upcoming events of interest to everyone. So Mariah, turn the floor over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, all the panelists, and thank you, Art, for this amazing moderation. I want to share the notion that this is part of the KMGN activities, the KM Global Network activities. These activities were initiated as to your request. All KMs around the world, we are asking all the time, what do you want? What are you wishing to have more that we don't have yet? And the idea of roundtables on new technologies was something that was on high priority this year. So therefore, we initiated these sessions, and this was today the second one, if I remember correctly. The next one will take place, just a minute, I'll share my screen. The next one will take place on July the 20th, same hour, and we'll speak about the digital transformation in the age of the artificial general intelligence, or at the new age. So I invite everyone to register to this event as well, and to other events we are holding. I also call you to save the dates, because we are holding on the 3rd week of October this year. Please read my lips. 3rd week of October, we are going to run a new initiative, a KM Awareness Week, around the world, globally, in how many countries we can. We believe that this first initiative will start maybe small this year and will grow from year to year if we work in the right direction. So we are calling you all, whoever thinks that he or she can help us in moving this new idea forward, please contact me. And we have representatives from all kinds of countries. We have teams in different countries that are already working. Maybe if you contact me, we will have another country. Maybe I can contact you with someone that's already on it. Art, we didn't hear yet from the US, so we also welcome you to take part in this. And everyone, KM is helping the world, but it can help it even more. So we need your help on that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Art, we'll say goodbye to everyone, and thank you very much again.
Yes. No, goodbye, and a thank you and goodbye, and hope to see everyone again for our next session.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Bye.
IIKI sessions as well. Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you.
Thank you. Take care.
Thank you.